In today's reading of A Match Made in Heaven, we're going to read Grandmother's Quilt. William Shakespeare once wrote, "Love comforteth like sunshine after rain." We have some rain on tap. As a young girl growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, I was especially enchanted by Grandmother Barkin's most cherished possession, a quilt she had made with swatches from the wedding gowns of generations of brides in our family. When company would come for tea, Grandmother would spread out the quilt, enthralling her guests and especially me with her tales of each delicate piece and the bride who wore it. The well-to-do brides in our family left behind swatches of silk, satin, brocade, and velvet, while the pioneer brides of lesser means contributed their soft muslin and their calico. A piece from Grandmother's own wedding gown was proudly displayed in the center of the quilt, where she embroidered "Love one another" atop the fading blue satin. To my delight, Grandmother would often smile sweetly and say, "This wedding quilt will be yours one day, dear Mary." Since Grandmother had only sons and no daughters, and I was the eldest granddaughter, the quilt would be passed down to me if I married first. Although I was approaching 25, I was more concerned with the kind of man I wanted to marry than getting married just for the sake of getting married. I sincerely doubted I would ever own the quilt until my childhood friend, Leonard Wynne, and I began to take the same path to work each day. As Leonard and I would wind our way through the narrow streets leading to town, he would amuse me with his stories. However, one crisp fall day in 1861, any hope of our romance developing was dashed when he informed me that he had enlisted in the Union Army. When the day came to see him off at the train station, I felt as though my heart would break. The enthusiasm and patriotic spirit of the women of Cleveland reached a zenith during the Civil War, and Grandmother Barkin and I were no exception. Freely and abundantly, Grandmother sent supplies from her stores, but her crowning sacrifice was yet to be made. Early one bright winter morning, a carriage rolled up to Grandmother's door, and out of it stepped two eager young ladies who took Grandmother aside and said in a whispered tone, "So you see, Mrs. Barkin, we are desperate for quilts for our soldiers." Slowly rising from her chair, the elderly lady stood and then proceeded to her wardrobe. Out came her treasured quilt, wrapped in white and fragrant with lavender. Calling to me, she said, "Mary, they need quilts at the hospital. I have no other ready-made ones. Are you willing to give this one up?" I hesitated for only a moment, realizing that every gift added one more chance of comfort for my Leonard. So Grandmother's quilt adorned one of the cots in the hospital and gave warmth and pleasure to many a poor sufferer, serving a purpose far greater than its maker had intended. Grandmother and I joined the tireless group at the Cleveland Hospital. One Christmas, as I was passing from cot to cot distributing grapes and oranges, I watched the eager looks of the poor fellows. Having emptied my basket, I went to assist in feeding those who were unable to help themselves. Taking a plate of jelly in my hand, I stepped to the side of one of the cots, noticing as I did that Grandmother's quilt lay upon the bed. The sight of it brought a rush of tender memories, filling my eyes with tears so that for a moment I didn't see the face upon the pillow. Then, with a start, I saw Leonard Wynne. As I dried my eyes, I got a closer look at the white face with sunken eyes, revealing the depth of his pain. No, it can't be, I assured myself, but the familiar voice erased all doubt. "Ah, Mary, I've been watching and waiting for you." Overjoyed, I asked, "Why didn't you send for me?" "I knew you would come sometime. The sight of this," he said, touching the quilt, "made me sure of it." During the next few weeks, we rediscovered the joys of our companionship. The happiness was quickly extinguished, however, when I arrived at the hospital early one morning to find Leonard's bed occupied by another wounded soldier. A nurse informed me that Leonard had been returned to his regiment. Along with Leonard, Grandmother's quilt had also vanished. And so the Christmas of 1862 came and went, bringing with it joyous surprise, only to snatch it and grandmother's quilt away. Another long year passed. I was busy as ever, assisting the cause by trying to impart the Christmas spirit to the soldiers in the hospital. One evening, at the close of the day's proceedings, I wearily laid my head down on a table. It was quickly growing dark, and I closed my eyes to snatch, if possible, a brief interval of much-needed rest. Suddenly I was startled. How long had I been asleep, and what was this lying under my head? One glance revealed grandmother's quilt. How did it get there? I squealed with delight as I heard a familiar voice, Leonard's. "I've come for my Christmas gift, sweet Mary," he said as he drew the quilt to his chest and pointed to the inscription, "Love one another." I wanted to ask you a year ago, but decided that I would not ask you to take a maimed sick soldier. I kept the quilt in memory of you. See, I fixed it so it would come back to you if anything happened to me. He showed me the label fastened securely to the quilt, to be sent to Miss Mary Barkin, Cleveland, Ohio. Then he told me how on one cold winter's day the quilt had saved his life. While sitting close to the fire to warm himself and to cook some potatoes, a stray ball from the enemy's batteries came whistling through the air, taking a straight course toward him. Luckily, he was wrapped in the quilt. The ball struck him, but because of the thickness of the quilt, got no further than his coat. That night, grandmother's quilt went back to its original owner, and my right to it as a wedding gift was firmly established by Leonard's proposal. This is a retold story from Annie F.S. Beard. And the story originally appeared in the Soldier's Journal. The Library of Congress has no record of the date. Later, the story was reprinted in Pictorial War Record, Battles of the Late Civil War, a 4-volume work published by Stearns & Company, New York, between 1881 and 1884. So it's a true story. Grandmother's quilt in a match made in heaven and in a wounded warrior's hospital room. Thank God for those tender mercies.